welcome to WUP with Jen. Thanks for continuing to listen to me. As I've mentioned before, I don't drop the pods necessarily in chronological order. I hope this particular pod isn't too dry and technical, but if you have a baby that doesn't eat, doesn't talk, and drools all over, then hopefully my story will help you and you'll know you're not alone. Continuing my journey with Elle, the last episode I published about our story was when Elle was about 8 to 9 months old, and we just learned about the Arizona Early Intervention Program through the Arizona Department of Developmental Disabilities, which all of us Arizona peeps call DDD. I'm not sure anyone has a super true ring of fondness when mentioning DDD because it isn't easy. And despite being a government-run organization, which we all know can lead to inefficiencies, the services truly are amazing. To recap, I've just lost my absolute mind and poise in the pediatrician's office when they discounted my daughter's inability to eat. And even though she was not on the charts for weight, the doctor said that she was a lucky thing because she's going to be petite. No one should ever label a person for their weight, for crying out loud. And I would like my child to thrive. And we have a diagnosis of an inverted chromosome number 6, which means nothing. And of course, as you may know, we later on discover it was an incorrect diagnosis. But that entire experience taught me that I could not sit back and trust others to know what is best for my daughter. It really is up to me to figure this whole thing out. I didn't know any other parents of kids with special needs. I felt very alone and isolated. And this was something that my husband and I shared only between us. And I have to work on this, of course, during the workday, during office hours, and at the same time, make sure my new job isn't affected while still caring for my toddler and running a household. Easy peasy, right? So I pick up the phone and make the call to DDD. I am terrified that somehow I'm going to screw this up. I've never filed for unemployment, any government benefit, and I'm too young to apply for Social Security. I just know that asking for help from a governmental body is scary and that I might only have one chance to line up services correctly. I didn't even know what services were available or what to ask for. And then I was afraid that Elle would be rejected for services because of our income level. Did we have to be at poverty or below poverty to get help? If we do get rejected, where else can I find a private pay early intervention program? I'm going to do whatever it takes, but I am blind, uninformed, and slightly hysterical. A lot of what happened at this time is fuzzy in my memory. I'm not going to be able to recall each step for how it actually happened, but what I can do is walk through how to get services at DDD and what they provide, along with other providers I discover along the way. And this is how I hope to pay it forward to other parents who are learning to navigate the system. I can only offer what I know about Arizona. It would be an absolute dream come true if anyone listening from another state would like to be that state's warrior unicorn parent and create a pod with me to share how to navigate their state system. So that's my call to action, friends. I need 49 more whoops. Reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, parents. For newborns, the first level of service provided through DDD is the Early Intervention Program. It goes up to age 3. And the best news is that eligibility is determined on the individual's needs and is not based on family income, but the individual's income. It's important to note that to continue to renew and receive services, I do not allow my daughter to have any money or any asset. She is not a beneficiary in my will or of my life insurance. I do this to ensure she receives services the rest of her life. That doesn't mean she's cut off from my support financially. We are taking care of her, or planning, I guess, long term, through a combination of a revocable family trust and a supplemental care trust, which is entirely another pod. And when I put that one together, I promise I will have an expert who can help guide families. The other eligibility requirement is that the individual must have a significant developmental delay in one area or an established condition that could lead to a developmental delay. I was pretty confident just the feeding issues alone. I mean, despite the fact that at this age she's just rolling over and isn't quite sitting up yet, and milestones are getting missed. But the diagnosis of the inverted chromosome was helpful because even though it wasn't a named disability, it was a medically documented abnormality. And now I had gobs of paperwork to complete. The application, I had to gather her birth certificate, demonstrate I had the right to make her legal decisions. Believe it or not, you have to provide evidence of primary insurance, and that's because it gets billed first, and then if it gets denied, DDD will pick up the tab. Of course, I had to provide records showing Elle had a qualifying disability, and this was essentially the geneticist report because we had no evaluations done at the time. I didn't even know where to go to get an evaluation done, and obviously my pediatrician wasn't sending me anywhere. I would like to call out an organization called Raising Special Kids that has very robust programs to help families like mine. If I had been told about them at the beginning, I don't know what our lives would have been like. Oh, I get choked up when I think about that. I didn't find out about them honestly until Elle was in elementary school. I mean, really? How is that possible? I have moved on and I'm letting the past lie in the past. And I do think today all hospitals and doctors' offices do now refer Raising Special Kids to families who need them. www.raisingspecialkids.org is where you can find them, and they know how to help you learn to navigate DDD. After I submitted the paperwork, I was set up with a home visit with someone from DDD. It wasn't super clear what their title and role was, just that they needed to visit the home and meet Elle, and now I'm completely paranoid. Is this caseworker going to enter into my Scottsdale neighborhood? And by the way, Scottsdale's a somewhat affluent area in Arizona. And is she going to decide that Elle doesn't qualify before she even gets out of the car? Will she judge me? What's she going to do while she's there with Elle? I have no idea what to expect, but I feel like this will be the biggest interview of my life. And the person who arrived was not like a warm, fuzzy person or a big talker. She asked me some questions about Elle, looked at Elle, and I don't remember much more about it. Looking at my daughter, she didn't, unless you were like a clinician, like just looking at her, you couldn't tell that she had a developmental disability. And so I don't really feel like anything got accomplished. And, I could tell that she was trying to see if I was telling the truth in everything I was describing, but I had no idea how it was going. It was really brief, and I tried to get some sort of feedback before it was over, like, hello, will my daughter qualify? And the lady was not in a position to make that determination, which I understood, but I'm like, now what? She told me I would be hearing from someone else within the division. She couldn't give me a name or a number, and I was scared to death that we would fall off the face of DDD Earth. To my pure joy and surprise, I did hear from someone shortly who would be Elle's caseworker or support coordinator. She made a visit to our home and was thus far the source of the greatest wealth of information I had received. I wish I had kept all of my records, but I don't remember her name. I remember her describing how we would be put with an early intervention team, and they would connect me with the MARC Center, which is now called MARC Community Resources, and that's MARC, not MARK. And that person would be our team lead and help us coordinate the evaluations, not only to determine that Elle needed these certain services, but to come up with what the goals would be so that they could work on an action plan. This woman was awesome. Not only because she was friendly and nice, but she assured me that Elle would get the services she deserved, especially because she had a medical abnormality as opposed to a clinical diagnosis. And Elle was approved for speech, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. In the meantime, since I wasn't really sure how long it would take to get anything going, I let her know I had some real concerns about feeding and that I felt like we needed to seek out help immediately. She told me to contact Phoenix Children's Hospital, PCH, which had an entire speech pathology branch that also focused on feeding issues. Okay, I feel awful. I had not thought to call PCH. That should have been my first stop. And I go through their speech pathology clinic. I had no idea that Elle's feeding issues, which are an oromotor issue, would be addressed by something that had the word speech in its name. I was trying to look up, help, my kid gags and doesn't eat food at 9 months of age. I was trying to find resources for that description. So we got set up at PCH for an evaluation. The ladies who worked with us were awesome. And this was one report I kept. And when I read it back to prepare for this pod, I forgot, and I can't believe at that time I had been medicating Elle with albuterol and Pulmicort for her respiratory issues that they thought might be related to feeding. She was a really raspy kid. She had been assessed by a gastroenterologist for the reflux and was on Zantac for a short time. And I took her off of it because I didn't see any progress, and I don't medicate just to medicate. They confirmed what I already knew, that she resisted the spoon and baby food, and they wanted to put together a plan for us, so I was ecstatic. The clinicians all agreed Elle would need speech therapy, and they actually suggested 2 hours a week so that there could be focus on both the feeding issues plus on the fact that she was only making an ah sound at the time. And yes, I agreed. It would be great to hear my daughter babble one day. We were set up for a barium swallow study to look at some of her aspiration, which she experienced throughout all of her respiratory issues. The idea of this study is to swallow barium, which can be seen in an x-ray of the upper gastrointestinal tract, which is the back of the mouth and throat. Of course, that means Elle has to swallow barium. The technicians created this nice little sitting scenario, like in this curved little chair, so she could sit upright and it was near the equipment. But now it was game time for her to actually drink the stuff. They brought out baby food and pudding and a biter biscuit for her. And I'm like, I'm here because she won't eat any of that. Like, seriously? At least it was fine to include the barium in a bottle of formula I had brought with me, but I was super concerned that the taste would make her resist. I had planned the appointment around when she would normally feed, so I was just really hoping that she was going to be hungry. And keep in mind, none of these appointments are quick. There's the commute to the hospital. Who knows what the wait's going to be like in the waiting room. The appointment itself, the discussion of the results, the checkout, the commute home, all during the workday when I had just started a new job and not proven myself yet. I felt awful about the time I needed off. And I worked as hard as I could to ensure my job was not at risk. I had so much guilt and worry weighing me down from so many angles at that time. Somehow, miraculously, Elle did drink enough barium for them to view on an x-ray, which in and of itself felt like a huge victory. But the results were negative for any physical issues. The recommendations were for speech therapy and oral motor feeding therapy. In the words of them telling me, Mom, it's a cognitive issue. It's a neurological issue. It's not a physical issue with her. I don't know what's worse, to be honest, but it all seemed insurmountable to me. Meanwhile, things are moving along with our team getting set up for therapies. The lady from the Mark Center was the equivalent of Cinderella's fairy godmother to me, and I will never forget her. And yes, I actually do remember her name. Talk about a rock. Someone who was a pillar of wealth of knowledge and experience and understood treating the whole family. She knew how hard it is on the parents, and she served me just as well as she did my daughter. Because Elle was home all day, since the daycare couldn't support her and we had to hire a nanny, most of the services could be home-based. And the therapists were always looking for sessions during the school day, since most parents needed after school. So we got set up pretty quickly with OT and PT at home. We had to do the oral motor speech and feeding therapy at a clinic because they needed their setup and their tools, and at least it wasn't too far away, but it was still time off work for me because for feeding, I needed to be there for that. I think Elle made progress with oral motor and feeding issues very quickly. I was amazed at these tools the therapist used. They introduced us to chewy tubes made of medium soft rubber that taught her how to bite and chew on them. I fell in love with the Z Vibes that were vibrating oral motor tools. Think of an electronic toothbrush, but with a rubber tip with bumps on it, and used properly in the mouth while vibrating, it brought attention and awareness. Elle finally learned that she had a mouth that could do things. They had other feeding tools like spoons and cups. Elle's favorite was a Z Vibe that was a chewy elephant, and she loved chewing on the ears. And it's not like a chewed toy that you just, you give a dog. You have to put it in her mouth and redirect her if she just sucks on it and gnarls on it. Later on, she would eventually graduate to a horn kit and a straw kit, all meant to reinforce the ability to make specific speech sounds. Oh, we purchased all these items from Talk Tools to have at home as well, and that's online at talktools.com. Amazingly, within about 6 weeks, Elle ate baby food. She didn't spit it out, and she swallowed it. My daughter was finally eating baby food. I couldn't believe it. She was figuring out how to move food around in her mouth with her tongue and swallowing. And she was starting to make more sounds, which was music, magical music to my ears. She had also had a huge drooling problem prior to therapy. We had to keep a bib on her at all times because she constantly drooled. And the oral motor therapy helped with that as well. Trust me, it was never fun to bring her in public in a cute little outfit that was completely saturated and wet with drool down the front. I've heard of some people fall in love with their physicians who cure them, and I gotta say, I fell in love with this speech therapist. She was just, and not in a creepy way, she was just young and smart and effective. And when someone teaches your kid to eat in intensive therapy sessions, they just really feel like guardian angels, part of your team, part of your family, and you don't ever want to let them go. I knew we had a long road ahead and Elle was behind in all other areas, but we were making progress finally, and I couldn't have hoped for more. Elle is now a year old and finally eating. I knew she wouldn't eat her birthday cake, but I got her one anyway, because right now she was still limited to baby food. But it's her birthday. It's her first birthday. I thought that at least she could make a mess out of it with her hands and play around, but nope. More sensory issues. The look on her face, it was if I was like placing her hands in dog crap, but one sensory issue at a time, I guess. I will make sure that I have provided links to the sites that I have mentioned in this pod. And if any of you have other resources to share, let me know. Contact me on WUP with Jen on Instagram, lesser extent on Facebook and Twitter. Ask me questions. I would love to answer questions in a mailbag pod. I would like to hear from you. I hope today's content was helpful and reassuring that if you keep looking and evaluating and get the right team, the right treatment and intervention, it's going to come your way. So whoop whoop to all out there. Friends, thanks for listening. This is Jen.